Okay, we have a new program here pertaining to Texanians that is changing the menu of the gun control issues. New Texan gun laws. To my viewers, please listen up.
Just weeks after the shooting massacre in El Paso, Texas, gun laws are changing there. Starting Sunday, September 1st, a number of new gun laws go into effect, and it's going to be a lot easier to carry and store guns in Texas. Let's go through a few of the ways. During natural disasters, Texans who are handgun owners will be permitted to carry concealed weapons without a license for up to a week after a state or natural disaster is declared, or if a person is evacuating from or returning to a disaster. In addition, disaster shelters will be allowed to give evacuees firearms. In relation to schools, there will be no limit on the number of armed school teachers and staff designated as school marshals. School districts also can't regulate how a licensed gun holder stores their handgun, firearm, or ammunition in their car in a school parking lot. The law also loosens restrictions around keeping guns at home. Homeowners associations will not be allowed to restrict the possession, transportation, or storage of firearms and ammunition. Landlords will also no longer be able to ban renters from having guns in their units. Protections have also been extended to gun owners who unknowingly enter places that prohibit guns. Those gun owners will no longer be charged with trespassing as long as they immediately leave the area after being asked. And under another new updated law, handguns will be allowed to be carried into places of worship such as churches or synagogues. It's up to the discretion of the place of worship as to whether they will then stop them. Remember, some of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history have happened in Texas. This includes the El Paso massacre that left 22 people dead. That's a mass shooting at Santa Fe High School last year that killed 10 people, and the Sutherland Springs Baptist Church shooting where 26 people were killed in 2017. In that year, 2017, over 3,500 people in Texas were killed by firearms, according to the latest data from the CDC. Joining me now is David Chipman, Senior Policy Advisor at Giffords, Courage to Fight Gun Violence, and former ATF agent. Good to see you again. David, talk to me about these changes. It does seem that Texas doesn't have a whole lot of restrictions on using, storing, buying, and carrying guns in the first place, and it feels like this is almost like a cleanup job to say those few that we have we're going to start to get rid of.
Yeah, clearly the governor sees that arming more people in more places is good public policy. I think it's something good for gun sellers. I think it's absolutely horrible for public safety.
Who are the people who push for these types of laws? In other words, we're not even marginally going into a place that might limit the number of people and the number of places in which you can have a gun. And I fully understand that Greg Abbott's not looking for that as a solution. But are there organizations that lobby for this kind of things, or is this just a straight up Second Amendment NRA type of thing?
Yeah, so I think their NRA is a group that would lobby for this, and other state-based organizations. I think the real problem here is often gun violence prevention organizations are forced to explain how their policies would have prevented the more recent attack. I don't see how these policies would have prevented the attack in El Paso. What they do is they sell guns, and they support this myth that a good guy with a gun is the only thing necessary to prevent gun violence, and I know that's just not true.
All right, just last week, Giffords put out a report titled Gun Laws and Violence in the State of Texas with some policy recommendations, including allowing local governments to enact gun laws that fit the needs of their communities. That's actually something they're not allowed to do in Texas.
Right. It's very interesting that, local governments, City of Austin can't, for instance, regulate how you store a gun in your car. Most local chiefs now are faced with the fact that as more gun owners carry guns, they're storing them irresponsibly in cars, getting stolen, and then used against the people who were carrying them in the first place. If the governor was very serious about preventing gun violence, he would start by making sure that you could not buy guns on the internet without a background check and without paperwork. Right now, there are 3,000 guns for sale in Texas that criminals can buy and use against the people who are arming themselves to fight criminals.
Anything in the changes that have occurred in Texas that are benign or that don't really matter versus those that really, I mean, you already give Texas, Giffords gives Texas an F on your gun law scorecard. Does this make it worse? I mean, can you get worse than an F?
Yeah, I'm glad you can't get worse than an F. But I think the real issue here is there are things that can be done. There are other states that don't have the same record of gun violence. And Texas has a legacy of this. And this good guy with a gun myth, Texans know is wrong. The cops being shot in Dallas know that it's too late to try to respond to an assassin trying to kill them. They needed to use a robot with a bomb to end that incident. And Philly police, were held at bay for an entire night. So until the Texas legislature starts to pass reasonable gun laws that prevent criminals from getting guns in the first place, there are plenty of Texans who've always had guns ready to use them. That is not working.
David, thanks for joining me. As always, David Chipman is a senior policy advisor at Giffords. Coming up next, the latest from Hong Kong as activists are arrested and a major protest is canceled. What it means for the standoff with China. We'll have a live report. You are watching Velshi and Rule live on MSNBC.
Well, there we go. Pertaining to the gun issue. Instead of moving forward, it looks like we've decided to go back the other way, in and towards the Wild Wild West. I think the bottom line is this: if you really get to looking at it with the masses, the general public, communities, I feel like that law enforcement knows that they can no longer protect, and this includes Homeland Security, they can no longer protect their citizens similar towards how they done 25, 30, 40 years ago. Because of their lack of ability to be able to protect their citizens, now they've opened up a brand new menu, or venue, whichever word you want to use, towards saying, okay, if it's this bad, then let's arm everybody. Phoenix, Arizona, the whole state of Arizona basically done the same thing. And of course, whenever you're dealing with a lot of coyotes, when you're dealing with a lot of people that is coming over the border through the southern border, that are so messed up that they have absolutely no recourse towards life or towards the dignity of life, I can understand the reason why that these states is doing this. Now, does this mean that we need to usher in the same sort of policies on a federal scale and basically arm the whole nation? I'm sure the NRA and the NRA supporters would tell you absolutely, 100%. But by putting that many more guns out on or in the open population is going to reside just exactly what this individual talked about, to the point that now you're going to have the same people that was storing or handling the guns that the criminals get a hold of, and the next thing you know, they use them against the people that legally obtained the weapons. It's pretty obvious that we're dealing with perilous times here in the last days pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy, that the Bible says that in the last days that it will become fiercely dangerous. And instead of society, the way that I see it, taking one step forward and 2 steps forward and 3 steps forward, in actuality we're taking 1 step forward, but we're taking 2 steps back. In other words, we're going back to what it used to be like back during the Wild Wild West days. How the West was won. Who was the fastest draw? Who had the luck of the draw of a hand to the point of being able to bring his assassin down quickly and effectively in the eyes of death. Whenever you get to looking at these death machineries that has been manufactured by man, it talks about in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, he who have not known the depths of Satan, hold fast till I come. He that shall overcometh will not be hurt of the second death. He never said that we wouldn't be harmed or go through some sort of pain pertaining to the first death. But the point that I'm trying to make to my viewers is this. Whenever the theologians, the preachers, the teachers, the rabbis, the priests, etc., 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 would read that verse, they automatically fell over to the aspect, well, he's talking about the 10 Commandments here. Thou shalt not kill, honor thy father and thy mother, thou shalt not commit adultery, etc., etc., etc. That was only part of it. That was only part of it. The other part was pertaining to all the other areas that man has developed, manufactured, in regard to guns. And I'm going to say this, and I know a lot of people are going to frown whenever I say this. It's also pertaining to electricity, running water, air conditioning, automobiles, anything that's been created in an unnatural form since Christ come into the world is what he's talking about. He who have not known the depths of Satan. Who planted all these ideals in all these people's heads towards having all these developments? Was it God or was it Satan? Well, you have to ask yourself a question. What benefit does it serve? If it serves the benefit of life, then yeah, I'll lean towards the godly realm, the godly ideals, the godly motivations, the godly concept towards wanting to sustain life. But whenever it comes to death, and we're talking about anything from a handheld Saturday Night Special 22 to a semi-long rifle automatic assault rifle that can shoot 500 rounds per minute. Or we're talking about missiles, especially nuclear missiles. Now I realize, I'm not naive, I'm not stupid. I realize that without these instruments, okay, that man has manufactured throughout the past, I guess, since the Iron Age, we as a society, especially over here in America, that stands as an ally with Jerusalem, would have already been taken over by the enemy to the point that we would have been conquered, or been taken over to the point that we would have had a different alliance that we would have been serving under. I realize that. But it also speaks in the last days of a major movement in the Bible. And it talks about a utopia. It talks about a peace. It talks about society that one day will, in fact, take their weapons of mass destruction and burn them and melt them down and turn them into plowshares. Once more, what direction does society really want to go in? Do we want to go in the direction towards arming every citizen and have massive guns on top of the massive guns that we already have here in America? Or is it time to rethink this and look at this from a different perspective? You know, as far as I am concerned, they have technology out there that no one that is issued a gun can have a gun for it to discharge unless the fingerprint matches that gun. Why haven't we moved over into that type of technology? That way, if somebody was to steal your gun, or a child get a hold of your gun, the gun would basically be a piece. It would be a paperweight. It wouldn't activate. It wouldn't go off. It wouldn't do no harm. Why haven't we already moved over into that type of artificial intelligence? I'm going to use that word, artificial intelligence, because it looks like everything's leaning towards artificial intelligence in the last days. Which leads me to another concept, which will be the last and final concept that I want to bring up. It's pertaining to the money issues. The feds, the Greenspans, the high-to-do people, they could have put an end to all this illegal corruption going on pertaining to the money exchanges that's being dealt with, regardless whether it's being dealt with drugs, dealt with prostitution, dealt with illegal immigrants working on grapery farms or our farms down in Florida. They could have already ended the money situation if they would have transferred the money from a dollar bill over to something like Bitcoin. That's basically a digital coin or a digital dollar. We could have already done this 10, 15, 20 years ago because the technology was available, but we still haven't moved over in doing something like that. You know, it's just been within the past couple of weeks that AT&T is fixing to put out a telephone in regard to people mishandling their own accounts because they can't remember all of their passwords or pass numbers. And I'm one of them. I'm not going to lie to you. Whenever you have 5 different passwords, and it has to be 7 or 9 characters or more, and it has to be something pertaining to this or that or that or this, it becomes confusing. Well, AT&T has come out with a telephone now that you don't have to have a password. Now, all you use is your fingerprint. That's correct. In other words, if a wrong person gets a hold of your telephone, it's basically a paperweight. It won't perform. It won't work. It sits dormant until the right fingerprint hits that screen. And no, I'm not talking about necessarily 5G capability. I'm talking about 4G capability, that until the right fingerprint hits that screen, you're not going to be able to open that telephone up. Why can't we do the same thing in guns? I'm afraid for humanity. And like I said, I'm not naive. I realize that the world that we live in is harsh, it's cruel, it's indifferent, it's cold, it's callous, it's evil, it's barbaric, it's heathenistic. But also realize that in today's society, with the technology that we have, once more, leaning on AI, we as a society can clean up this on every perspective if we'll just put our heads together and say enough is enough, and let's exchange, which will take basically a revolution to do this. Let's exchange the bad ideals for better ideals. And this includes climate control. This includes what type of automobiles that we drive, that we shouldn't be driving. This includes going to alternative fuels as far as air, solar, natural gas, which is a whole lot cleaner to the atmosphere, rechargeable batteries, which I'm seeing a little bit more of in this area, or if you go out west, you see them all over the place out there. Why can't we speed things up so that we'll stop all these innocent lives that are being taken from us in such of a cruel, harsh environment. That's the question. That's the $64,000 question. How come we're still hanging on to these old ideals, to these old methods that we know aren't working? As far as I'm concerned, they should do an exchange on all gun manufacturers, and it should be mandated by the president under some sort of red flag law going into the Patriot Act, that from now on out a gun manufacturer cannot manufacture another gun using old style tactics. That gun has to be modified with digital artificial technology to the point that whoever buys that gun will no longer be able to lose access of its performance just in case the wrong person gets a hold of that gun. And it doesn't matter if it's a child, and it doesn't matter if it's somebody on drugs, it doesn't matter if it's a common criminal. We could put an end to a great deal of these massive shootings. And it would take something, like I told you a while ago, it'd take a revolution to do it. Towards gathering up all the old junk and recreating new junk. Or, if you don't want to use that word, gathering up all the old technology and reconforming to the new technology. The same way with the telephones of people that can't remember the password. And once more, I've had problems myself. And if the truth be known, we've probably all had too many coals in the fire to the point, now did I use the card this time? Or did I use the cat's name? Did I use my cousin's name? You know, some people use names out of the Bible, Moses, Abraham, Jesus Christ, Joseph, Methuselah. Some people use names spontaneously out of wherever. But I think what I'm talking about makes some sense. And I'm going to be quite honest with you. I'm not going to beat around the bush with what I'm talking about here. I think this is my personal opinion. Okay? If we was to do a reconforming on these guns right here that you're looking at right here, to the point that no one could discharge this gun unless the right hand had it in his presence. I think if we listen to the prophets of God pertaining to the ministries that is spread all over America, I think if we was to conform our way of thinking and what we're doing to the atmosphere, these events right here that could possibly go from a Hurricane 3 to a Hurricane 4, and possibly, you can't rule it out, a Hurricane 5 hurricane that, according to the records, this ain't ideology that I'm talking about here. This ain't fiction. This is fact. According to the records, we only had hurricanes that would hit the United States like this about every 500 years. And then it started narrowing down from 500 years to a 100-year storm. And now we're looking at these hurricanes that are building because of the waters that are warming, us not paying attention to all the plastic, us not paying attention to the carbons going up into the atmosphere. Now we're looking at sometimes a major hurricane, in which I hope that this one don't turn into a major hurricane, but let's just say hypothetically that it does. Now we're looking at a major hurricane on the level of at least once every other year, and sometimes every year, and sometimes we have more than one that hits the United States, and they're intensifying. They're getting worse. The span is getting closer and closer and closer together. But yet now we got old school thinking, people like Donald Trump, that does not want to agree that mankind is doing something to the world pertaining to global atmospheric conditions. Just like we have people that are not willing to conform to a gun or a phone pertaining to the right type of artificial intelligence that are out there that can help to prevent these type of mass shootings and these type of ordeals that we've been living through now for, I guess, the past, since I know 2006, 2016, we've been looking at this now for 13, 14 years. It's time that somebody come up with a solution towards how we're going to dig our way out of this, because instead of going forward, like I said a while ago, it seems like humanity is taking one step forward and two steps back. And that is not the direction that I believe, this is my personal belief, that our Heavenly Father wants us to go in. Like I said, the old school methods pertaining to how barbaric the world was, pertaining to evil society over in the Middle East and other parts of the country, especially down in like Honduras and South America and even Mexico. We need to get over this, and we need to move forward. And I'm just not talking to the Americans. I'm just not talking to the gun laws that they're taking on these new identities down in Texas or Arizona. I'm talking to the planet. I'm talking to the world right now. I'm talking to the survival of our children and our grandchildren, of them being able to see a better future for tomorrow, other than resorting to pure, mere, absolutely barbaric, heathenistic type violence. You know, there was a time whenever man really couldn't even talk the way that I'm talking right now. If you go back to the prehistoric days, whenever they lived in caves, they discovered fire. And then it wasn't long after that they discovered the wheel. And then it wasn't long after that they discovered iron. Why can't we take the iron that has been discovered and conform it and use it in a different theater, so that we will not have to continue to go through these sickening scenes of seeing so many innocent lives be destroyed on a day-to-day occurrence. We're going to have to wake up, people. We're going to have to get it right. I realize, once more, I'm not naive, but these gun manufacturers, I don't know if this is a Glock. It kind of looks like a Glock to me. $1,429.99. I'm pretty sure that there'll probably be an extra $200 added onto that to go to a smartphone technology to be able to reconform this same product that you're looking at right here to the point that any individual could not fire it. It would just be basically a paperweight unless the right person that had the right license could operate this piece of machinery. I realize what the governor of the state of Texas is talking about pertaining to catastrophes, pertaining to a state of an emergency. Okay? Once more, I'm not naive. But I also realize that it was we, the people, that blinked, that put it on automatic pilot. It was we, the people, that put it on cruise control, and now we're just now waking up to the dangers and the facts that's going on around us, regardless whether it's coming in the form of this or coming in the form of this. It's time to awaken the sleeping giant over here in America to the point that we rediscover what we need to do pertaining to these pro-gun laws, tactics. And I realize that word don't say tactic, but it taking effect in Texas the 1st of September. To me, we're only adding insult to injury by putting hundreds, thousands, possibly millions of more guns on the streets to the point that they get stolen, they get taken, they get put in the wrong hands with the wrong people. We're only adding insult to misery. Kind of like not paying close attention to what we're doing to the atmosphere. We're only adding insult to misery towards seeing the same thing again and again and again, which your psychiatric communities would tell you that is the first sign of insanity, in continually doing the same thing but expecting different results. If you're going to have different results, you're going to have to change your whole format. You're going to have to change the whole dynamics if you're going to see different results. Once more, this is a problem that now is not just here in America. New Zealand just had a major breakdown pertaining to security issues. What did New Zealand do? New Zealand went in and started repurchasing people's automatic assault rifles to say enough is enough, and we're not going to be like America, and we're not going to tolerate this type of insecurity. We're not going to tolerate this type of barbaric, heathenistic approach like the Americans has done now for the past 15 years or longer. And it's only intensifying. You know it as well as I do. We can sit here and we can blow smoke and we can try to lie about it and we can try to say, oh, it ain't never going to happen again. And then a week later, it happens again. It's just like the atmosphere up in Chicago. There's places up in Chicago, especially lower Chicago, down towards the south. There's places in Chicago that has basically turned into Baghdad. That's right. It's turned into nothing more than a military combat zone. Is that what we want? Is that the best that we can do? My suggestion is this. If you want different results, start doing something different. Because it's obvious that the old actions are not fitting the bill. Thank you to my viewers. Good luck to all of us. And once more, shalom to Almighty God of Nazareth. Shalom.